The first second is the trap. Most people do not lose power when they are insulted. They lose it in the first second after the insult. That first second is where everything is decided. Not by the other person, not by the words they used, not by the room watching you. It is decided by whether your nervous system obeys the provocation before your mind has time to choose. Someone throws a small comment at you. Maybe it is disguised as a joke. Maybe it is wrapped in a smile. Maybe it is said quietly. So if you react, you look unstable, and suddenly something inside you moves. Your chest tightens. Your face becomes warmer. Your thoughts start preparing a defense. You feel the urge to correct them, to prove they are wrong, to show that you are not someone who can be disrespected. That urge feels like strength. It is not. It is the beginning of control. The person who provoked you did not need to beat you. They only needed to move you. They only needed to discover that one sentence could change your breathing, your voice, your focus, and your self-possession. Once they know that, they do not see you as strong. They see you as readable. This is the uncomfortable truth behind reaction. It gives people information. You think you are defending yourself, but you are also revealing yourself. Your anger reveals what you cannot tolerate. Your explanation reveals what you still need approved. Your fast response reveals that their opinion has enough weight to interrupt your inner world. And once someone sees what interrupts you, they know where to return. That is why some people keep touching the same wound. They keep making the same joke. They keep asking the same loaded question. They keep using the same tone. Not because they are confused, because the button still works. Most people call this disrespect. A sharper mind calls it measurement. They are measuring your emotional perimeter. They are learning how far they can enter your mental space before you react. They are testing whether your peace is protected or publicly available. This is where the old belief becomes dangerous. You were taught that mature people always communicate. You were taught that silence is weakness. You were taught that if someone misunderstands you, you must explain yourself clearly until the truth is understood. But not everyone wants truth. Some people want access. They ask questions not to understand you, but to place you on trial. They accuse you not because they need clarification, but because they want to watch you defend your identity. They provoke you not because they are brave, but because your reaction gives them proof that they can still reach you. This is why never react, never explain, just ignore is not passive advice. It is a rule of frame control. When you react, you enter their game. When you explain, you accept their authority. When you ignore, you remove your energy from the system they were trying to build around you. A courtroom has two positions, the judge and the defendant. The judge does not sweat, rush, or over-explain. The judge observes. The defendant speaks quickly, presents evidence, begs to be believed, and hopes the room will accept their version of reality. In many conflicts, the person who explains is not always wrong, but the person who feels forced to explain has already accepted the lower position. That is why the most powerful response to certain attacks is not a clever comeback. A comeback still proves the words landed. It still gives the attacker a reaction to study. It still keeps you inside the exchange. The deeper move is absence, not nervous silence, not weak silence, not silence that secretly begs to be noticed. A deliberate refusal. You do not defend your worth to someone who was never qualified to measure it. You do not give a full tour of your intentions to someone who only entered your mind to rearrange it. You do not explain your character to someone who benefits from misreading it. You let the comment fall. You let the room feel the silence. You let them sit with the ugliness of what they tried to start. This is the first power move. You stop treating every insult like an emergency. You stop acting as if every misunderstanding must be corrected immediately. You stop giving people the privilege of watching you struggle to be seen correctly. Because the need to be seen correctly can become a leash. If someone can make you panic by seeing you incorrectly, they can control you without touching you. They only need to misread you on purpose. They only need to imply something false and watch you rush to repair your image. That is not strength. That is obedience with a louder voice. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, do not begin with words. Begin with stillness. Feel the first second. Notice the heat. Notice the sentence forming in your throat. Notice the old program trying to run. Then do nothing, because the first second is the trap. And if you survive that second, the game begins to collapse. Starve the predator. The person who provokes you is often not looking for a solution. They are looking for a reaction. That difference explains everything. A person who wants a solution speaks with precision. They want clarity. They want repair. They may challenge you, but their challenge has direction. There is a problem to solve, a truth to reach, a boundary to understand. A person who wants a reaction behaves differently. They are vague when clarity would help. They are sarcastic when honesty would work. They make comments that can be denied later. They say, "I was only joking," after aiming directly at the one place they knew would hurt. This is not communication. It is emotional hunting. Some people feed on the proof that they can disturb you. Your anger gives them stimulation. Your sadness gives them importance. Your explanation gives them authority. Your long response gives them a stage. They feel powerful because a few words from them change the weather inside you. When you react, you pay them. You pay them with attention. You pay them with energy. You pay them with your mental space. You pay them with the rest of your day, the replay in your head, the imaginary comeback, the conversation you keep having after they have already left. That is why ignoring is not empty. It is starvation. You are cutting off the emotional currency that made their behavior profitable. But here is the part most people misunderstand. The first time you stop feeding a pattern, the pattern usually gets louder. They do not quietly accept that you have changed. They escalate. They press harder. They become more personal. They accuse you of being cold, arrogant, sensitive, childish, fake, or afraid. They try to make your silence look like weakness because they need you to defend it. This is the moment most people break. They endure the first insult. Then the second one comes sharper. The attacker twists the knife. They mention something private. They raise their voice. They laugh in a way that makes the room feel unsafe. Suddenly, the pressure becomes too strong, and the old reaction returns. Then, the attacker learns a lesson. Escalation works. They learn that if the first insult does not move you, the second one will. If the soft jab does not open the wound, the crueler one will. If silence does not make you chase, accusation will. This is how people train each other without noticing. But if you remain still through the escalation, something strange happens. The attacker begins to lose rhythm. Their words start hanging in the air without your reaction to support them. Their hostility becomes visible. Their need for control begins to look desperate. A provocation without a reaction is an embarrassing thing. It exposes the person who threw it. When you react, the spotlight moves to you. Your anger becomes the story. Your tone becomes the problem. Your defense becomes evidence that you were affected. But when you do not react, the spotlight stays on them. They must stand beside their own behavior without your emotion covering it. That is the humiliation they fear. This is why silence can feel heavier than a response. A response gives them something to fight. Silence gives them themselves. And many people cannot tolerate themselves without noise. There is an old kind of power in making a person hear the echo of their own words. You do not need to insult them back. You do not need to explain how immature they sound. You do not need to perform calmness like a spiritual mask. You only need to remove your participation. Let the sentence die alone. Let the silence widen. Let their face adjust to the fact that nothing landed. This is not weakness. This is tactical absence. And absence creates uncertainty. A reactive person is easy to understand. An unpredictable person is harder to touch. When you always snap back, people know where you are. When you always defend yourself, they know what you fear. When you always chase clarity, they know how to keep you in the loop. But when you stop reacting, you become unreadable. They input disrespect and receive no useful data. No anger, no pleading, no over-explanation, no visible wound. Just a calm, closed system. That is the black box effect. It is not about pretending you have no feelings. Pretending is weak because it still depends on the audience believing your performance. Real control means you may feel the hit, but you do not hand the feeling to the person who threw it. You own the reaction internally. You do not donate it externally. This difference separates self-control from suppression. Suppression says, I am burning, but I must look calm. Self-control says, I feel the heat, but I decide where my energy goes. That decision is power, and the more you practice it, the less attractive you become to people who feed on access. Predators do not stay where there is no food. Manipulators do not enjoy rooms where their tools stop working. Provocateurs do not like targets who make them look alone. Eventually, they hunt elsewhere. Not because you defeated them in an argument, because you made attacking you unprofitable. That is a deeper victory. You did not win the noise. You ended the transaction. The insult is not always about you. The deeper you understand people, the less personal their insults become. At first, disrespect feels like a direct attack. Someone calls you arrogant, weak, selfish, fake, dramatic, too quiet, too ambitious, too cold, too sensitive. Because the words are aimed at you, you assume they are about you. Often, they are not. Many insults are confessions wearing the mask of judgment. People usually attack through the vocabulary of their own fear. A person ashamed of their stagnation mocks your ambition. A person terrified of independence calls your boundaries arrogance. A person addicted to chaos calls your peace boring. A person who cannot control themselves tries to make your calmness look unnatural. They are not always describing your character. They are revealing their prison. This does not mean criticism is always false. A disciplined mind can hear truth without collapsing. Sometimes people correct you because something real must be corrected. That is not disrespect. Correction wants clarity. Disrespect wants reduction. Correction says, look at this more honestly. Disrespect says, become smaller so I feel larger. The difference matters, because if you confuse disrespect with truth, you will spend your life defending yourself against other people's wounds. This is where the Machiavellian mind changes position. It does not immediately answer the insult. It studies the insult. It listens to the exact angle of attack. Why this word? Why this accusation? Why now? Why in front of these people? What fear is trying to disguise itself as judgment? The insult becomes evidence, not against you, against the person speaking. A coworker makes a passive comment about how hard you are trying. Look closely. Maybe your effort exposes their avoidance. Maybe your movement makes their stillness uncomfortable. Maybe calling you too ambitious is easier than admitting they are afraid to risk anything. A relative keeps criticizing your appearance, your money, your choices, your independence. Look again. Maybe they are not evaluating you. Maybe they are trying to pull you back into a version of life where they still feel superior. A friend calls you distant when you finally stop being available for every crisis. Maybe they do not miss you. Maybe they miss the version of you that absorbed their chaos for free. That line will make some people angry, because many people call it love when they are really grieving the loss of access. Once you see this, reaction becomes less tempting. You do not feel the same need to defend yourself because the attack no longer looks clean. It looks contaminated with the speaker's hidden motives. You stop hearing, "This is who you are." You start hearing, "This is what threatens me." And that shift changes everything. You move from being the defendant to being the observer. You no longer stand inside the accusation, trying to fight your way out. You stand above it, watching the mechanism reveal itself. This is dominance through perception. The angry person is inside the storm. The observer is studying the weather. When you stop reacting, you force the other person to remain visible. Their words do not become a mutual fight. They remain their words. Their bitterness does not become your anger. It remains their bitterness. Their insecurity does not become your explanation. It remains their exposure. That is why a calm gaze can be more devastating than a perfect comeback. A comeback tries to beat the insult. A calm gaze examines the person who needed to say it. And people can feel when they are being studied instead of fought. It unsettles them. They expected your defense. They expected your wound. They expected proof that they could pull you down into the same emotional mud. Instead, they feel examined. That is a cold mirror. But this level of power requires honesty with yourself too. You cannot use this idea to avoid all accountability. Not every uncomfortable comment is projection. Not every challenge is manipulation. Not every person who disagrees with you is threatened by you. If the words contain truth, take the truth without accepting the disrespect. If the words contain only poison, do not drink it just because it was handed to you in a familiar voice. That is maturity. You separate signal from noise. You correct what is real. You ignore what is bait. You do not let the delivery decide your self-worth. You do not let the accusation define your identity. You do not let someone else's internal conflict become your emergency. This is where ignoring becomes more than a tactic. It becomes perception. You are not ignoring because you have no answer. You are ignoring because you already received the answer. Their need to provoke you told you enough. Their choice of insult told you enough. Their hunger for your reaction told you enough. Some conversations end before the other person stops talking. You simply realize there is nothing there worth entering. And when that realization becomes real, silence no longer feels like losing. It feels like leaving a room that was built to waste your life, become unavailable to the game. The final level is not acting unbothered. It is becoming difficult to disturb. There is a difference. Acting unbothered is still a performance. It is the silence of someone who is burning inside, replaying every word, checking whether the other person noticed the distance, hoping the absence hurts them back. The mouth is quiet, but the ego is still arguing. That is not power. That is reaction without sound. Real silence does not orbit the person who provoked it. Real silence does not wait to be understood. Real silence does not keep checking whether it is working. It removes attention so completely that the other person no longer controls the meaning of your absence. This is the hardest part, because many people do not want peace as much as they want visible victory. They want to ignore someone, but they still want that person to feel punished. They want to stop explaining, but they still want their silence to be interpreted correctly. They want to stop reacting, but they still want emotional revenge. That is why silence can become ego in disguise. And if you do not see that, your silence becomes another chain. The true power move is not making someone regret losing access to you. The true power move is no longer needing their regret to feel free. That is emotional sovereignty. It means your mental space has a hierarchy. Not everything enters. Not every opinion matters. Not every insult receives a seat. Not every accusation deserves a trial. Not every person gets a doorway back into your mind simply because they know how to knock loudly. Most people have no hierarchy inside themselves. Every comment enters. Every look is analyzed. Every misunderstanding becomes urgent. Every disrespect becomes a crisis. They call it sensitivity, but often it is an unguarded mind. A guarded mind is not closed. It is selective. It knows the difference between a real conversation and emotional bait. It knows the difference between correction and humiliation. It knows the difference between someone seeking clarity and someone seeking control. Once you know the difference, life becomes quieter. Not because people stop trying, because fewer attempts succeed. They may still insult you. They may still misunderstand you. They may still test whether the old version of you is available. They may call your calmness cold, your silence arrogant, your absence cruel, your refusal immature. Let them. Their interpretation is not your assignment. This is where people waste years. They keep trying to manage the way they are perceived by people committed to seeing them through a distorted lens. They adjust, explain, soften, shrink, and return, hoping one day the other person will finally say, "Now I understand." But some people only understand the version of you that serves their story. The moment you stop serving that story, they call you the villain. Let them have the story. Keep your energy, because the deepest power is not making everyone see you correctly. It is surviving, being seen incorrectly, without rushing to repair the image. That is where you become unavailable to the game. You no longer respond just because someone throws bait. You no longer explain just because someone plays judge. You no longer return to conversations that only exist to drain you. You no longer confuse access with kindness or silence with weakness. You decide what deserves you, and that decision changes your presence. People feel when your attention is no longer cheap. They feel when your peace cannot be purchased with a sarcastic sentence. They feel when your nervous system no longer belongs to the room. They feel when the old buttons have been removed. This is not loud power. It is the kind that makes noise look childish. There is a strange relief in this. At first, silence feels like something you are forcing. You count seconds. You control your face. You fight the old need to explain. But with time, the pause becomes natural. You begin to notice that most provocations are small fires looking for oxygen. Without your breath, they fade quickly. And when they fade, you see how much of your life was spent keeping other people's chaos alive. You were not always defending yourself. Sometimes you were maintaining the argument because the argument made you feel seen. That is the final addiction to break. The next time someone tries to provoke you, pause. Feel the old program rise. Feel the heat in your chest. Feel the sentence forming in your throat. Feel the urge to defend the version of you they are trying to distort. Then let it pass. Do not catch their insult with your hands. Do not carry their accusation into your evening. Do not become the employee of someone else's chaos. Let the words fall. Let the silence stand. Let the game continue without you. Never react does not mean you feel nothing. It means provocation does not choose your movement. Never explain does not mean truth does not matter. It means not everyone receives your inner world as evidence. Just ignore does not mean you are weak. It means you finally know what is beneath response. And once you know that, you become harder to control. Not because nobody can reach you, because fewer people deserve to. Some things are beneath response. Some people only lose power when you stop giving them yours.